Good afternoon, everyone. I can see quite a few of you who have started trickling in. Thank you so much for joining this session on a wonderful Sunday, taking out time from your Sunday schedules to be present here. I can promise you it is going to be a power pack session. You are going to be learning a lot out of this. So, while we're waiting for a couple of more students to join in, quickly in the chat window, if you could let us know which city are you dialing in from. I am dialing in from Mumbai, India, and Amy is dialing in from the UK. So it would be really nice to know where our participants are coming in from. Great. So we have someone from Lagos, Nigeria. Hi. We have someone from Nairobi, Ghana. Okay. Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. Wow. Thank you so much, all of you, for tuning in. I'm sure you all had the chance to at least be a part of the Seed Business School festivals, which were hosted in your respective countries, in your respective cities, and had a chance to meet all the admission directors and get a few of your questions and queries answered. So, building up on that, what is the topic about today? We have a boot camp today on how to build a strong business school application. You're going to be learning about strategy, story, and of course, the support that you need to help this come through. So, yes, joining me on the panel today is Amy Duckworth. Thank you so much, Amy, for taking out time from your busy schedule and on a Sunday. Uh,
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Amy brings nearly a decade of experience in graduate management education. She has led admissions at Imperial College Business School and Cambridge Judge Business School. With her deep expertise in evaluating applications and guiding candidates, she empowers, just like the name of her company, aspiring candidates to navigate the admission journey with confidence and clarity. So, in today's session, she is going to be talking about giving you guidance on not just how to build a strong business school application, but tips on where and when you can apply, how to learn, and how to effectively manage your career stories, and a lot of tips. Uh, I'm going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Sabahat Rzuk. I'm a senior associate director at Seed Global Education. We are a UK headquartered company which facilitates interactions between top global universities and prospective students, giving you a chance to understand more about your career journey, about your study abroad journey. Now, coming on to the fact that most of you have attended the Seed Business School festivals, how else can Seed sort of help you in your study abroad journey? So I am going to quickly share my screen. Uh, in terms of the next steps as such, what you can do is there are a few scholarships, etc., which are available for you. So if you log on to the Seed website, as you can see on my screen under finances, if you click onto scholarships, you will notice quite a few scholarships which are available from different universities around the world. So in case if you're aspiring to apply to any of these universities, I would highly recommend that you visit our website and get some more insights into the scholarships that these universities are offering, along with application fee waivers, etc. Along with that, if you are someone who's looking for education loans, we can help you with that. All you need to do is fill in a short survey over here, showcase your interest by filling the form in, and someone from the team will get in touch with you. Now, what is next in terms of what SEED has to bring for all of our students in Africa? We do have some more in-person events which are coming up in the month of October. There will be admission reps from top business schools, not just from US and Canada, but from different global universities across the world, coming to Accra, Lagos, Nairobi, as well as Kigali. So in case if you or any of your friends are interested, I would highly recommend just logging on to our website and registering yourself for these festivals so that you don't miss out on the opportunity. Great. So that is how Seed Global Education can help you with the future steps in your study abroad journey. Now, before I hand over to Amy, I'm going to quickly run a poll question for today, just to sort of understand where you are at, what phase of your application journey you are on. So on the screen in front of you, which part of the business school application process do you find most challenging? Is it deciding when and where to apply? Is it writing compelling essays, something which really you are hesitant about? Is it about how can you go about showcasing your career goals and achievements in the CV? Or is it about understanding where can you secure strong letters of recommendation for? While I understand that a lot of you might have all of these as a concern, I want to really know which out of all of these do you find the most challenging? So very quickly, the poll is up on the screen in front of you. To all 133 of you and counting, if you could go ahead and cast your votes, that would be really helpful for us to understand where you're coming in from. Of course, post this, Amy will start her session. And then in the end, we will be taking questions from the audience. So in case if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. We will take all of the questions at the end of the presentation. So all questions go in the Q&A box. With that, I'm going to quickly end the poll and showcase the results in front of you. So 51% of you find writing compelling essays to be a bigger challenge, followed by deciding when and where to apply, and of course the rest. So I'm sure, Amy, this will be helpful to you as well. With that, Amy, over to you now.
Okay, yeah, great to see we've got so many of you. We've got over 140 of you now on the session, so that's brilliant to see. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, really great to see that the things you're finding most challenging are all things that we're going to talk about on today's session. So hopefully you'll find it useful. I'm just going to share my screen if you just bear with me one moment. Okay, is that working?
Yes, Amy, we're good to go.
Okay, great. Okay, so today we're talking about getting started with applying to business schools, strategy, story, and support. So just a quick introduction for those who didn't attend. I did a session just over a week ago. So for those who didn't attend that session, my name is Amy Duckworth. I'm a former director of admissions and head of admissions and recruitment. So I spent several years working at Cambridge Judge Business School and then heading up the admissions side of things at Imperial College Business School in London. So I've got around 10 years of experience in higher education, and last year I established Empower Admissions Consulting, and so I provide consultancy services to applicants and business schools. And one of the things that I'm most passionate about is supporting others with their professional and personal development, so hence the career path that I've chosen. So today's session, this is what we're going to cover. Application strategy, when to apply, how many schools to target, how long you might need to spend on each application, and how to choose the right application round. We're also going to talk about what business schools look for, so key qualities and themes to reflect throughout your application, especially in essay responses, which I know is something that a significant number of you are finding challenging at the moment. We're also going to talk about telling your career story, so how to structure your CV and to clearly communicate your career goals and progression. And we're going to finish off with letters of recommendation, so understanding the purpose of letters of recommendation, choosing the right referees, and how to guide the conversation with those recommenders. Okay, so application strategy. So when to apply. So in terms of where you are in your career and thinking about when to apply to business school, one of the key things to look at is the work experience requirement for the program that you're applying for. So some programs will have a minimum work experience requirement. So for MBAs, it's typically at least 2 or 3 years. And then some master's programs may have a maximum number of years work experience, so they don't want people to apply who've got more than a certain amount of experience already. So look at those things, and then also have a look at the class profile. So for the program you're interested in, when they'll publish information about the current cohort, what's the average amount of work experience in that cohort, and how does that fit with where you are in your career? So it's thinking about what career stage this program is designed for. And it's not one size fits all. It's not this is the right age to do this program, but typically there'll be a range and the programs will be designed for a certain career stage. So it's important to understand whether the program you're looking at is the right fit for you at the stage you're at in your career. And that's something that you can talk with the school about as well if you're unsure. But looking at the class profile is a really good place to start. So because you'll see where your experience might fit within the cohort. So moving on to how many schools to target. So as a general rule of thumb, I would say 3 to 5 schools. And the reason I say that is you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and pin all of your hopes on only one school. However, each application does require a significant amount of effort and an investment of time if you want to do it well. So if you're trying to simultaneously complete 10 business school applications, that's a huge undertaking alongside working. And I would say that it's unlikely you're going to produce 10 top quality applications. So I would say looking at 3 to 5. I mean, again, it's not that it's just a guideline. If there's 6 you really want to go for, fine. But I would just avoid spreading yourself too thinly by going for too many schools. And similarly, if you don't apply for if you don't apply for enough, then you risk you risk not achieving a place and being able to start a program when you want to. So I would consider you might want to consider some of the schools you're applying to would be stretch schools, so ones where you're aware that it's incredibly competitive, and the chances of admission are perhaps lower, and then you perhaps want to think about some maybe more backup type, safer options, and have a mix of those. You don't want to apply, for example, to 3 stretch schools. You want to have a mixture of schools in there, so that you're putting yourself in the best position with your options. How long to spend on each application? So the advice, what I would say is it always takes longer than you think. Each application, it will likely take multiple drafts. There'll be, especially the essays, will take a number of iterations of each essay, and you'll be working on it, over an extended period of time. It isn't something that you just sit down, write in one go, and that's done. It's normally an iterative process, and you do need to allow time for that. I typically would advise starting on your application 3 to 6 months before the deadline that you're targeting. That being said, it is definitely possible to do it quicker, but I'm just the reason I say this is because you'll be doing this alongside your work commitments. If you're applying to multiple schools as well, it's a big undertaking. So I would say 3 to 6 months before the deadline. That being said, I have worked with clients who've done it in a month and have produced a great application with a lot of, hard work and, dedicated effort in that month. But giving yourself more time is always a good thing. And finally, I wanted to talk about which round to apply in. So generally, there's the kind of advice that's given is apply early. You should always apply early. And it is good to apply early if you're ready. So I would always say, don't apply early if that's at the expense of the quality of your application. So if you're really not ready, putting in a rushed application to round 1 isn't going to do you any favors. That if the deadline is around the corner and you've not done your essays, and perhaps you're thinking, oh, I should retake my GMAT or my GRE, applying early is not just it's not a blanket policy that applies in all cases. If you're ready, then yes, apply early. If you're not ready, then I wouldn't submit before you're ready and submit a weaker application than you're capable of just because you want to get it in round 1. Especially if you're looking at potentially retaking tests or anything like that. One thing to bear in mind is when you think about application rounds, if you're looking at funding, sometimes schools have certain deadlines that you have to apply before in order to be considered for scholarships. So that is something to consider if you're wanting to be considered for scholarship funding. But yeah, it's just being mindful of not submitting an early application that isn't your best application. And often candidates can be a bit worried about applying in later rounds and thinking it's going to be a lot more competitive and that there aren't many places. In reality, there are still places in later rounds. Schools wouldn't have later rounds if there weren't still places. So, that doesn't mean, if it's not the case that if you don't apply early, you don't have a chance. So I try and always, advise people to consider their options when it comes to the rounds, and not just, think that round one is the be all and end all. So some do's and don'ts on application strategy. So do make sure you meet the school's work experience requirements. It's really wasting your time if the school says they want people to have a minimum of 2 years or 3 years post-graduation work experience at the start of the program, and you don't have that, and you think, oh well, I've got 1 year, but maybe I'll be okay. I mean, generally, I wouldn't advise that. If you've spoken to the school and they've indicated that you could apply anyway, even though you don't meet the requirement, fine. But otherwise, I really wouldn't advise doing that. Do be realistic. So as I said, you might be thinking about 1 or 2 stretch schools, but do be realistic when you're thinking about chances of success, and maybe thinking about some backup options. And do give yourself time. The application will take longer than you think. Some don'ts: don't apply to schools that you wouldn't actually be willing to attend. So, if you're looking at a list of about 10 schools, are you actually, the schools that are number 9 and 10 on that list, would you actually want to attend those schools? Because going to business school is a big investment of your time and money, and you need to be happy with the place that you're going. So don't just apply to places for the sake of it. Don't pin all your hopes on one school. Do have some other options. There's bound to be more than one school and one program that would suit you. So don't pin everything on one school. And as I was saying, don't rush to apply in an early round if you are not ready. If you are ready, excellent. But if you're not, then I wouldn't advise it. So what are schools looking for? And so we're thinking about the whole application process, and specifically the essays. I know that that's one area that's a concern for a lot of people. So there's a bit of a myth that there's an ideal candidate, that schools want to admit that there's a certain type of candidate that business schools like to see, and that you should try and fit this mold. But in reality, the schools value diversity, and there's no one type of candidate that they want to attract and admit. Actually, one thing that they really do value is authenticity. So if you're writing things in your application because you think it's what the school wants to hear, and it doesn't really reflect you, then that isn't going to be very impactful. So don't try and be who you think the school wants you to be yourself. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but that really is what the schools want. So there is no type of candidate. There's no one type of candidate that schools want, but there are some key themes and some things to think about, qualities and characteristics that you should try and demonstrate and think about reflecting in your application and your essays in particular. So I'm just going to list some of these, and the school will, on their website, and when they talk about who they're looking for, they'll probably mention some of these and perhaps a couple of others as well, but these are just kind of general ones. So collaboration, curiosity, communication, self-awareness, leadership potential, open-mindedness, and a global perspective. So those are some attributes that schools like to see in candidates. So when you're thinking about the examples that you choose in your essay responses, and also if you're invited to interview, when you think about the examples that you choose to use when you're talking about your work experience in an interview context, think about these themes. So how do the examples that you've had so far in your professional life, how do they reflect these key qualities and themes? Collaboration is hugely important in business school programs. There's a lot of project work, group work. The expectation is that you'll be learning from each other as well as from the curriculum and from your professors. So that collaborative ability is very important. Curiosity. So they want people who are not just accepting the status quo, people who are challenging the status quo, people who have innovative ideas, people are open to new things, intellectual curiosity, And communication as well, as I mentioned, the group work. Can you, it's all right having a brilliant idea, but how do you communicate that? How do you work with others? How do you respond to the ideas of others? And how do you kind of how do you share your perspectives in a group setting? So those are all really important skills. Self-awareness. So this is something that's really important in the essay questions. So when you're giving how well do you know yourself? And when you're talking about an example in your essay response, what does that show about you and what did you learn from it? So you might be giving, think about you're writing your essay response. Always be asking yourself, so what? You write a statement, so what does that mean? Why is that important? What did that teach you about yourself? How did that have an impact on your perspective going forward? I've put leadership potential because it's not essential to have leadership experience, but leadership potential is important. And then open-mindedness, we've talked about curiosity and communication, but open-mindedness in that you're going to be studying alongside people from a huge variety of different backgrounds, both in terms of the geographical regions that they're from, also the industry backgrounds. How open are you to other people's perspectives? Ideally, you don't want to be rigid in your views. You want to be open to learning from others and open to seeing the world through others' eyes. And then a global perspective. So if you've had international experience, that's brilliant. But if you haven't, that's also okay. That doesn't mean you can't apply. Schools really like to see international experience. So if you've kind of had the opportunity to study or work abroad, that's great. But also if you've worked with a diverse team, if you've worked with clients from different countries, if you've worked with suppliers from different countries, it's not necessarily, that you have to have lived in a different country. It's more about the global perspective and the global exposure. So we're going to move on and talk about telling your career story. So how do you kind of show what you've done so far? So the purpose of the CV in the business school application, so it's to show the impact you've had in your professional life so far and by extension where you aim to go. It demonstrates key career defining accomplishments, growth, leadership and potential. And it's to showcase that you'll be an asset to the class now and in your future career. So the CV is obviously just one aspect of your application, but it is an important one because it's a snapshot, it's a summary on, one page, one page snapshot of who you are and what you've done so far. So what to include on the CV? So your academics, the subject, institution and grade. So this would be university level. You don't need to go any further back than that. You don't need to include high school or anything. If the school you're applying to wants that, then they'll ask for it. But it's typically just university level. Any professional qualifications. So for example, if you've done the accountancy qualifications or any other professional qualifications, they could also go on your CV. Work experience, so for each role you've held, the title, the company, the location and the dates. And any relevant technical skills. So for example, if you can speak multiple languages or you're skilled in coding, those things belong on the CV too. And then key achievements, any awards or recognitions, that could be at university or it could be professionally as well. And then your interests and extracurriculars. So this is a nice way of kind of showing other things you're interested in outside of your professional life. You can also use it, for example, if you haven't had a leadership position, but you've had the opportunity to develop your leadership skills through an extracurricular activity. For example, it could be a charity you're involved in or a sports team. And you've had the opportunity to develop your leadership skills there, then you should include that. So it doesn't all that the schools are looking at transferable skills. They don't all have to have been developed in your day job. And what the schools are looking for. So obviously your academics, so your grades from your previous studies, or if it's a program that requires the GMAT or GRE, then they'll be looking at the scores for that. Career progression. So I mentioned with the CV that you need to put each job title and that you've held and the dates. So make sure that you're highlighting progression. So if you've held multiple roles at the same company, then include all of those, because the schools want to see that career progression. So don't just include the more senior role, do include the each title you've held, because that does show that you've had that development and that growth. If you work in a smaller organization, or perhaps an organization that has quite a flat structure, doesn't matter if you haven't had promotions as such, but do highlight increases in responsibility, because that still does show the professional growth. International exposure we've talked about. It doesn't mean just living or studying in a different country. Thinking about, it could be that you work with international clients or a diverse team. So just thinking about, ways that you could have had international exposure through your work, or even, could be through your interests or extracurricular activities. And then for each role on your CV, you should focus on impact and achievements. So this isn't a job description. This isn't just listing your responsibilities. Focus on impact and achievement. What have you done in this role? What tangible outputs have you had? And focus on impact and achievement. Obviously, that you certain key responsibilities, for example, if you're leading a team of X number of people, yes, but try not to get down into the weeds of what your day-to-day job is. This is for impacts and achievements. And written with clarity, impact, and relevance. And as I mentioned previously, you want to demonstrate a range of transferable skills. So it doesn't matter, if it's a skill that you've developed outside of work, that's fine. But it's thinking about, the skills that I mentioned previously that schools were looking for. We talked about communication, collaboration. These are the skills that the schools are looking for. So think about how your CV demonstrates those skills. And clear personal impact, so shows who you are. And this is where the additional interests is a nice opportunity to show that you're a well-rounded person, and some of the, this is where you could potentially differentiate yourself as well. What makes you different from another candidate who's working in a similar role? And quickly on the format of the CV. So most schools want 1 page, some insist on 1 page, but certainly no more than 2. Use the school's template if they have one. Many schools do provide a template. And I would advise against the use of colour and images. So it's not the place to show your creative side. It's, they're generally the school templates are, quite simple. You want to be impactful in the words you're using, not a crazy design idea. And we're going to finish off by talking about letters of recommendation. So what is the purpose of a letter of recommendation in a business school application? So there's a few things that letters of recommendation are useful for. Firstly, they give an external perspective on the candidate. So it's not just what the candidate said about themselves in the application. This is, another viewpoint. So almost kind of social proof. This isn't just, I think this about myself. You've got another, an external party is validating that. It provides insight into the person's character and also their soft skills. So the skills we were talking about, communication, collaboration, these are the types of things we would expect to see in a letter of recommendation. It adds credibility to the application. Again, it's not just what the candidate is saying about themselves. This is somebody that they know well, that they've worked with in a professional setting, who is like backing up that this person is who they say they are and has done what they say they've done. Demonstrates evidence and examples of qualities and skills in practice. So I'll come on to this, who to choose to write your letter of recommendation. But you would expect it to show detailed examples and evidence of, how you've worked. and the skills and qualities that you've said you have, should be reflected in these examples. And it enables benchmarking against peers. So often with the letters of recommendation, often the school has a template that when you input their details into the application, they will receive the recommendation request, and it may ask them to compare the candidate against others in their peer group and things. So it's kind of benchmarking. And then it's an authenticity and consistency check. So again, is this candidate who they've said they are? Is what the letter of recommendation says consistent with what the candidate has said about themselves and what they've said they've been doing? So who to ask? This can be a bit tricky. Ideally, so the first thing to say is actually make sure you check the school's requirements on who to ask. They will generally give you, what they're looking for. Often they say it should be a direct line manager or supervisor. And most schools will say that it can be a current or former, because they recognize that not everyone is comfortable with telling their current line manager that they are, applying for business school and potentially leaving the company. So it could be a former line manager or supervisor. But generally, it shouldn't be somebody who's a peer, shouldn't be somebody who is at the same level as you. Generally should be somebody who's been supervising or managing you, either in your current role or a previous role. It should be someone who knows you well, who's worked closely with you. So just on this, sometimes people think that a letter of recommendation will have more impact if it comes from a very senior person. That isn't the case. Schools don't care about the level of seniority of the person who's writing your letter of recommendation. Actually, they really want the detail. And if it's someone who's a senior person at the company who you've interacted with a handful of times, they're not going to be able to write something with the level of detail that is going to be useful in an MBA or a business school application. So it's more important that the person knows you well and has worked closely with you than just the level of seniority that they hold. It should be someone with whom you feel comfortable discussing your career goals and future plans. This is important. You need to ask them if they're willing to write a letter of recommendation for you. You shouldn't provide someone's details to a business school without checking with the person that they're comfortable with it. So this doesn't really mean you're going to need to have a discussion with them about your goals and your plans for business school. So it should be someone with whom you feel comfortable having that conversation. And if you're an entrepreneur or work in a family business, often schools will accept a client or a supplier. If you work in a family business, a family member, even if they are your supervisor in a professional context, is not going to be an acceptable person to provide a letter of recommendation. So if it's your own business or a family business, generally speaking, a client or supplier is the best bet. If you're asking someone who, for example, generally schools want the letter of recommendation to come through a professional email address. So if it's someone who is now retired or is on maternity leave, for example, that will be okay. You'll just need to explain that to the school. And some do's and don'ts on letters of recommendation. So do check the school's letter of recommendation requirements. They will most likely explicitly say who should and shouldn't write your letter of recommendation. Do check with the person first. So don't provide someone's details to the school without asking them. And do speak with them about your application and your goals. That's important because, whilst they will be the one writing the letter of recommendation, it is important that they understand why what your motivations are for going to business school and how it fits with your longer term plans. So I do recommend choosing someone with whom you feel comfortable having that conversation. Don't ask someone who doesn't know you well. So even if they are in a really senior position, or maybe they attended the school that you're applying to, it doesn't matter. If they don't know you well, they're not going to be able to write an impactful letter of recommendation. So don't go with someone who doesn't know you well. Don't ask someone who doesn't have time. So if you ask someone and they say, well, yes, but can you just write it? I would strongly advise going against. I would strongly advise not going down that route. So sometimes, if you ask someone and they're busy, it's not that they're unwilling to help, but they're kind of saying, yes, yeah, that's fine, but you do it and I'll sign it off. That isn't going to come across very well in the application. Often it's pretty obvious that that the same person has written a letter of recommendation as the rest of the application. Just the choice of words and phrasing, it does tend to stick out. So I would recommend asking someone else, explaining to them why it needs to be an external perspective. It can't be you writing it. If they genuinely don't have time, then it's important to ask someone else, really. And finally, as I've said before, don't worry about the level of seniority of your recommender. That isn't something that schools care about. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the information that I wanted to go through. So I'm happy to take any questions. If anyone is looking for any one-to-one guidance, I do offer coaching and strategy sessions, feedback on applications. You can see my contact details there. You've also got my website information. So if anyone is interested in working together, then send me a message. You can contact me on LinkedIn or by email, and we can talk about that. But for now, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was certainly useful. Quite a few things have been covered in the session, and I can see the questions which are coming in. So I'll start with the very first question that we have from Sibishu, who I think wants to know that, once a person has applied to the university, what information can they sort of expect from the university in terms of responses or outcomes, like at what time, or how will the university get back to them as such?
So this varies. Some schools will actually publish on their website the decision timeframes. So they say our round one deadline is the 1st of September. You will receive invitations to interview by the 1st of October. You will be notified of a decision by the 1st of November. Some schools are very clear about, this is the time frame, this is how it works. Some schools are less so, and they may say, you can expect to hear from us within 4 to 6 weeks. So it really depends on the school. But I mean, from submitting the application, if it's a school where they have rounds, generally you would expect to hear something within a few weeks of the that round deadline. If it's somewhere that's operating rolling deadlines, that's a bit a bit trickier to predict, because they're looking at small numbers at a time. But where it's a round, they'll be reviewing the applications as one kind of batch, and then making decisions on who to invite to interview. So generally speaking, within a few weeks of that deadline.
Thank you so much, Amy. I hope that answers your question. Before moving on to the next one, quite a few of you have asked about whether there will be notes, whether they can get this presentation. So we will be uploading this presentation onto our YouTube channel, and you will receive some communication from my team tomorrow with a link to the YouTube channel. So of course, you can always keep going back to that and referring to it, so that it makes it easy, like you said, at the time of your application, and it works as a guide for you. So yes, I hope that answers most of your questions which were around that. Taking my next question, which is from Gilbert, and this is something, Amy, which I feel is up and coming in the recent years. If a student who's pursued sciences as an undergrad and then wants to do a master's in business administration, would they sort of qualify for that?
Do you mean if their undergraduate degree was a science subject?
Correct. Yeah.
And they want to do an MBA? Yeah, so generally speaking, MBAs don't require a specific background. So generally, MBAs, general management program, they are happy to receive applications from a wide variety of disciplines and professional backgrounds. So yeah, that shouldn't exclude you. And I'm thinking unless it was something that's, you know, a specific with a specific specialization or something. But yeah, generally speaking, MBA is open to, you know, anyone with, you know, from any undergraduate study background.
Also, just to sort of add on, a lot of universities now offer STEM designated masters and MBA programs as well. And of course, anyone who's from the sciences or engineering backgrounds, they do qualify for those programs as well. Am I correct, Amy?
Yeah, so I would say if you're looking at specialized master's programs, they may have some more specific requirements
Yes.
around the background that you should have. But generally for MBA, it's broader and they tend to not have specific requirements about the previous study that you've done.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gilbert. I hope that answers your question. The next question is from Shishanda, and I'm going to elaborate this a little bit just so everyone can sort of benefit from it. From a student who's looking to study abroad, where can they take their GMAT or GRE, Amy, one? And second, when is a good time for them to get started on that bit of the application process, like starting to work on their GMAT and GRE?
So in terms of where you can take it, there are test centers globally, but it is also possible to take it online now. They introduced this during COVID, but they have like online proctored versions, so that it's still, you know, it's still secure, but they have like online verification and online proctoring kind of system. But yeah, you can take it at a center or you can take it online. You do need to book it, so you'd need to have a look at the GMAT or the GRE website for more information about that. And if there isn't a test center near you, then the online option is probably the easier one. In terms of when to get started, as soon as possible, because the scores for GMAT and GRE are valid for 5 years. So even if you're not quite ready to start applying for business school at the moment, it's a good idea to get the GMAT or the GRE out of the way, because actually trying to simultaneously prepare for GMAT or GRE and do the applications for business school is really challenging, because I've worked with clients who are doing that. It is possible, by all means, people do it. But whilst you know, alongside work, GMAT, GRE prep and applications is quite a lot. So if you can make it a lot less stressful for yourself by getting the GMAT or the GRE out of the way first, because like I said, the score is valid for that 5-year period. So I would recommend starting that as soon as possible. There's lots of online resources and practice tests to help you. There are also there's courses and tutors you can work with as well. And I would say typically people find, well, I will just say as well, schools often have no preference. Typically schools have no preference between GMAT and GRE. If they say they'll accept both, then either is fine. If you're not sure which one, it can be worth doing a practice test of both to see which one you feel might be, you know, you might feel better suited to. And I forgot the other point I was going to make about GMAT and GRE. But yeah, it was doing the practices and yeah, to check which one. Yeah, never mind. I've forgotten the other point that
No problem.
point that I was making.
The bottom line is get started as soon as possible, because often we see students who have taken the GMAT once, not gotten the score that they would like, and then they're struggling at the last minute while they're in the application process to try and get that score that they are looking for. So the earlier the better is what even I would say.
It's really common to take the test multiple times. So
Yes.
if you take it once and you don't get the score that you are looking for, try keep going. It's really common for people to take it. There's also a direct correlation between the hours of preparation and the outcomes. So it really is a case of the more you practice, the better you will do in it. So don't give up. That was the thing I was going to say. I've remembered now. Most people will have out the quant, most people will have one of those that they're naturally stronger at. So you don't need to have a perfect score in both. Schools expect that, you know, one will be stronger than the other, depending on your background and, you know, your kind of, you know, your skills and abilities. But schools, ideally, they want the scores to be well balanced. So you don't want either of the scores to be super low and for that to be a red flag, you know, a cause for concern for the school. But, you know, it is normal if one is stronger than the other, and schools are used to seeing that.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Amy. So next, there are a couple of questions around the CV. What I'm going to do is I'm going to club them all together so we can address all the concerns at one time. One is, of course, being that what if someone has a CV which is more than a page, and in case if a university asks for an CV which should just be one page, what are the most important things that they should fit into their CV to make sure that they are getting everything covered? Also, in case if a school does not have a requirement of just a one-page resume, in that case, is it better to have a resume which exceeds more than one page for a student to sort of really show what they want to showcase?
I would say for business school applications, generally one page is best. If you've I've seen previously where people have had, you know, if it's a long career and perhaps they've had more of like a portfolio career with a number of roles held simultaneously, I've, you know, seen that go on to 2 pages. But, you know, if you've got 3 years work experience, there is no reason why your CV can't be 1 page. So you need to think about what you're including on the CV. So typically, I think if the CV's if it's too long, the first things to look at are, have you got qualifications on there that are older than your university studies? Because they don't need to be there. And then what level of detail have you gone into for each of the roles that you've held? You know, have you focused on impacts and achievements, or is it a very lengthy job description? You know, think about the most impactful information about that role. What you know, what were the tangible outputs? You know, it could be something like, you know, increased sales from this to this. It could be managed a portfolio of clients from 15 countries. You know, what do you want to say that's impactful? You know, you want it if it's too long-winded, then the key messages will get lost in there. And then also thinking about, you know, your current role is probably going to have a bit more detail. If you're going right back to, say, there's an internship on there, and that's fine, by all means include the internship. It could be very you know, it could be a very worthwhile thing to include on there. But how much detail about that internship do you need? For example, if you've got 8 bullet points for an internship that you did 5 years ago, that's probably not necessary. So it's just thinking about, you know, if you've got a limited amount of space, where do you want to allocate that space? What is the most important and the most impactful?
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. Just a follow-up question on that very quickly. Let's say, for example, if a student does have research experience, should they include that on their CV, and vice versa? If they do not have any research experience as such, does that look like a red flag on their CV?
The research experiences in from their studies?
Yes.
So I suppose it would depend what they're applying for. If they're applying for a general management program like an MBA, research experience wouldn't be expected. If they're applying for a specialized program where research experience is expected, then obviously it's more important to include that. Or perhaps if their area of research relates to something else, for example, their longer term career goals, or perhaps a business idea that they have, if there's some link, or if it's a requirement, then it could, yes, that you could include it. If not, then then if it doesn't relate to anything and it's not required, then perhaps not.
Okay, thank you. So of course, whatever you have on your CV should be something that the school is looking into, or the program that you are applying into. Moving on to the next segment, Asad, there are quite a few students who've asked about pivoting or diverting. So there is a question from someone who wants to know that if they are in the field of social sciences and now want to divert to business school, since this is a huge pivot for them, how can they go about telling their story and ensuring that they are doing it in the right way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So often people use business school as a platform to make some sort of change in their career. So that's completely normal. So schools will be used to seeing that. I think it's important to show that you've done your research about the target industry that you want to work in. So if it is a pivot, what have you already done before? Business school is not just going to be a golden ticket to get you to the target role or sector that you want. What research have you already done? How well do you understand the requirements of the roles that you're considering after your studies? Have you already had any conversations with people who've made this sort of transition, or with people who are working in the sector that you're targeting? So I think it's about being well researched and well informed, and having a plan, and not just expecting that the business school will do everything for you. It's showing that you've been proactive and you've done your own research and you know what's required.
Great, thank you. Moving on to my next question, there's quite a few questions around the essay topic. So people want to know, how long should their essays be? Is there a word limit that they should keep in mind? What are the major stories as such that should be covered in an essay? Ideally, how long should an essay be, etc.? So if you could talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that, I think that would be super helpful.
Yeah, sure. So the essays vary hugely between the schools. So if you so this is something to look at when you start to prepare for your for working on your applications. The schools will set out on their website and in their application form what their essay questions are. And they do typically have quite strict word limits as well. Often you'll find that they're not that high. So it's not the case that you're going to be having to write a huge extended piece. Often it's more difficult to get it below the word, below the word limit that they've set. So being impactful, being concise is really important. But yeah, they will say that what the word limit is. Do stick to the word limit. And the themes will vary, but it could be things like telling them about a time that a team that you've worked in. It could be a time that you failed at something. I think one of them has, I know they will have various ones, like LBS has one that's what makes you unique. They can be quite, and then you'll typically have one that's about your career goals. So that's quite common across schools, is that there'll be one that's around your short and long-term career goals. So that tends to, and some of them ask about your particular motivations for that school and that program. And sometimes it's more reflecting on your experience with, could be a teamwork or a failure or a collaboration. So generally they're looking for examples of, kind of a story of, something that's happened to you so far. But not just what happened, but like why did it matter? What impact did it have? And they're looking for that self-awareness and that self-reflection. This is why I say it can take a number of iterations to get this right, because it's quite tricky. Often the essays do require quite deep introspection, and that isn't something that you can just sit down and write in 20 minutes. So it will take some time, and it'll probably take quite a number of versions before you have something that you're happy with. One general piece of advice I would say is, making sure that it's relevant. So if you're giving examples, for example, if the question was about a time that you failed at something, and you're thinking about an example from high school, perhaps, and say you're in your late 20s, are we really saying that you've not failed at anything since high school? Is that the most relevant, a high school example? So just thinking about, the relevance and of what you're writing. And often, they may be happy with the responses not being strictly a professional example, but it should link to your professional life in some way, that the kind of the insights that you draw should be applicable more widely and in your professional life as well.
Thank you, Amy. That was very insightful. Building up on what you just said about, the insights from a person's work life should reflect in their essay. There is a question from someone who wants to know that, is it okay if they have sort of already written in their CV about their work life achievements as such, and then how do they go and showcase this in the essay so that, it's not repetitive, that they're mentioning it in their CV as well as talking about that in their essay as well?
So generally speaking, on the CV, it will be much more concise. There'll be very limited information. If something is highlighted on your CV that you then want to use an example, so it could say it's an extracurricular activity and you've got it there listed on your CV, but then you want to use that as one of your essay questions, an example to talk about. You would expect, in the essay response, you would expect more depth. You would expect you'd expect that the self-reflection, the insights. You wouldn't get that from on a CV. You would expect it to be one line. So it's okay if something appears more than once. I would be careful about you don't want to use the same point for multiple things throughout the application. Try and have some variety. So bring in examples from different areas of your professional life, or different, try not to repeat, try not to make every example about the same thing. Try to, bearing in mind that the admissions officers who read these applications read hundreds and hundreds of applications. Try and make sure it's interesting, and think about that, about showcasing that variety.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I hope all of these questions have given all of you a lot of insight into it. One last question about essays before we move ahead to the rest of the questions is, there are certain schools that require slide decks for submission as your essays. What information is the most relevant? We know a lot of schools which also ask for Kira essays, video interviews, slide decks, yes, etc. What kind of information should a student share in these essay formats as such?
I mean, it would depend on the specifics of what the school is asking, but generally speaking, what they're looking for is this: they're looking for the same skills and qualities. It's just how they're asking for it. And things like, for example, the Kira essays, I think more schools are introducing those because there's growing use of AI as well by candidates. So making sure that the applications and candidates are authentic is really important, and having video essays is a great way of doing that. I know they can be quite daunting, but often they will have an opportunity for you to do a practice one as well. And I know it's a bit uncomfortable, but you can also film yourself doing practices and then watch back or practice with someone else if if you have that option. Again, it's just a case of practicing, but they are looking for they're looking for people thinking on their feet, and it's not, if it's a Kira assessment, it's not, they don't expect it to be super polished, and they're looking for it to be authentic.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm sure that's helpful. One interesting question which has come in is, let's say a lot of students who've already done an MBA in their home country, it could be in South Africa, in Nigeria, Ghana, can they still go and apply for another MBA program to a business school abroad? And would this sort of count in favor, or would it count against them?
I think it would depend on why they're wanting to do this second MBA. So I've come across situations where people have done a previous MBA immediately after their undergraduate studies, so without any work experience. They've then gone and acquired several years of work experience, and they then want to do a second MBA internationally. And I think that there can be situations where that makes sense, but I think it's being very clear about what you're aiming for, and what are your motivations for this MBA that you didn't fulfill or achieve with the previous one. So if you're coming straight from one MBA into another, I couldn't really see a strong rationale for that. But if you did an MBA, like I said, straight after your undergraduate studies, then you've worked for 4 or 5 years, and now you want to do, an MBA in a different country, and you've got a clear motivation, you've got a clear career goal, and how this all links up, what's the story, then I think it can make sense, and I don't think it would put you at a disadvantage. But it's about framing it, and it's about what's the narrative.
Thank you, Amy. I know we are coming towards the end of time, but I'm going to take a few more questions very quickly, if that's okay with you, Amy.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. There is a question from Kennedy here, who wants to know that, let's say for a school has asked for a letter of recommendation from a university professor, and they've already passed out a couple of years ago. Would it be okay for them to send some important points to the professor to include in their letter of recommendation?
Yes, that is fine. I think as long as you're not sending, this is the letter of recommendation. If you're giving them an update on what you've been doing since you last and since you last saw this person, if it's someone who you either, if they were your professor several years ago, or you worked with them a couple of years ago, giving them an update on what you've been doing since and what your goals are, that's completely fine. As long as you're not giving them, word for word, this is what to put in the letter of recommendation, then that's great. And, sending that in writing is fine. Having that conversation with them is also fine.
Thank you. Another question on the letter of recommendation itself is, Daniela wants to know, one of my work experiences is a company that went defunct over the years. However, how would schools confirm my position over there, especially if my recommender was a manager in the company which no longer exists as such?
So if the recommender no longer works in that company, you could still use them as a recommender, but presumably if they work in a different company now, they could use their professional email address for the new company, or they would simply need to make sure that they add this as additional information. Most applications will have a kind of further information or any additional information you'd like us to be aware of kind of box, and you would explain, my letter of recommendation is provided by this person, I worked with them at this company, this was the context, however the company no longer exists and they now work here. So you would just need to provide that explanation, and then presumably the LinkedIn their LinkedIn would tie up with the career trajectory as well. So as long as you explain it, it's not a problem. The same with people I've seen where their recommender has been retired, obviously, and then they're just using like a personal email address, not a professional one. That's fine as long as you explain that to the school. Then it's fine.
Yeah, that should be okay.
Yeah.
A similar question from Falusa. She wants to know, is it okay if she gets the general manager sales of her company to write a letter of recommendation for her? Her current supervisor is someone who she does not want to be writing her letter of recommendation, but she works in the finance department.
I mean, some schools will specifically say, if the school has specifically said that they want it to be from your current manager, but most schools do offer some flexibility, as they do recognize that not everyone wants to or is able to tell their current manager that they're applying for business school. So if you're asking someone else in the company in a more senior position, it shouldn't be a colleague, it shouldn't be like a peer in your team. But if you're asking someone more senior in the company, generally that would be okay. But as I said previously in the presentation, just making sure that that is someone who knows you well and can provide that detail and depth that the school is looking for in the recommendation letter.
Great. My last question about letters of recommendation, because Amy, I know we've covered this in a lot of detail, is regarding the letter of recommendations. Can a family member write a letter of recommendation? Your mother, father, uncle, aunt, I think, yeah, no, that's unless Yeah.
Definitely not. No, that wouldn't be appropriate. And a school, you know, I can't think of a scenario where a school would be satisfied with a family member's letter of recommendation. If you work in a family business, generally the best bet would be a client or a supplier, perhaps. Yeah, it shouldn't be a family member.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. I can see there are quite a few questions which are still there, but we have covered this during the presentation bit. And of course, like I mentioned, we will be sharing the presentation with you. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Uh, Amy's contact details are right out there on your screen, so you can take a quick screenshot very quickly. You can get in touch with us on our website through Seed Global Education. So, firstly, Amy, thank you so much for a super insightful session and for answering all of these questions. And
No problem.
I'm sure the students, I can definitely say that it has been really helpful to all of you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much for joining on a Sunday afternoon. I wish all of you a happy rest of the Sunday. And once again, we will be in touch with you soon. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.